We're speaking now to economist Dr. Indera Sagewan, who is no stranger to the Observer. Let me wish her a happy Mother's Day and welcome.
Thank you very much, Mikey. Let me too take this opportunity to wish all mothers in Trinidad and Tobago and even further afield a very, very blessed Mother's Day.
All right. Let's get down to the meat of it. Last week, press conference, first cabinet press conference by the new administration. And of course, economists are saying that they're not surprised by the state of the economy. First of all, government will have to cut expenditure, which of course is not always easy. What are we looking at?
Well, the state of the economy, you're correct, is not surprising. Even on the night of the election, I was on television and I made the point. The new government, even though on the campaign trail it may have said it was committed to doing a lot of things, it really can't know what it can afford until it takes the office and has the moment, the time in order to be able to assess what the situation is. And even the assessment that we got in that post-budget statement may not even completely reflect what the state of indebtedness is. There may still be things that will continue to unfold as we go forward. So there is no doubt in the fact that there is our revenue situation is significantly lower than our expenditure situation, and our indebtedness, the amount of money that this new government now is obligated to repay, is going to be significantly higher than was expected. In a situation like this, obviously, just like a household, if you have a situation where your expenditure is more than your income, then you're faced with two options. One, you either cut expenditure or you find new sources of revenue. And I think that the Prime Minister was very, very, she was very, what's the word I'm looking for? She was very much the leader in the moment that the country needed, in the way that she articulated the problem, in the way she committed to looking after the needs of the people, even if it meant in the shortest of term increasing our indebtedness. She identified the approximately $4 billion that is required for this particular month in order to maintain the level of expenditure, and she went even a step further to identify how she's going to get that money. She identified the issue of rescheduling government treasury, the issue of borrowing, the issue of drawing down on the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. She has no choice in this moment. Absolutely no choice. Cutting expenditure is not something that you simply take a sharp scissor and start doing carte blanche. It needs time. The government needs time to be able to determine where, not just where expenditure can be cut, but where there can be savings in order to be able to manage the needs of people against what realistically is affordable. And also, she continued to emphasize the importance of finding new sources of revenue and prioritizing that. And I mean, certainly, I think the appointment of the new trade minister, who has a significant role to play in non-energy diversification, I think that we can all agree that this is a really good appointment, and that it gives a sense of hope. I mean, I think the response on the whole has to be one of hope. I mean, she made some decisions in terms of cuts, she said, and she put a greater sense of responsibility on those she has put in office to manage our affairs. She has been very clear. The trend where ministers can have an expectation that they can have housing in and around Port of Spain is no longer available to them. If they want to have an apartment in Port of Spain, use their housing allowance and pay for it. Capping of the allowance with respect to vehicles. I have been calling for this for a long time, and serious kudos to the Prime Minister for doing this, saying no security patrols for ministers, let the security be used to fight crime. I think these are things, that I think, are very warming to the hearts of citizens,
and I agree.
therefore business confidence.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, many times we've heard, the narrative that, listen, U.S. citizens, you have to tighten your belt. U.S. citizens, you have what expectations you may have. You may need to curb that because this cannot be delivered. This cannot be given to you. But now we're hearing something different as to say, listen, if I'm going to lead, I'm going to start leading by setting the example with myself and among my cabinet and my government. They must understand that they too must show the citizens that they have to tighten their belts. So I think we did witness and we did hear the language itself was very strong, and it gave us a sense of, if we're going to be in this situation, then all of us will have to make such a sacrifice to cut exactly what needs to be cut.
Absolutely, Mikey. I mean, there are a lot of hard decisions that have to be made, but I think we need to give the government a moment to be able to truly assess things and to start to roll out their plans in terms of how things are done. I do see our indebtedness increasing for quite some time because there's no magic bullet. People, the Prime Minister can't snap a finger and suddenly there are new sources of revenue tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
These take a little bit of a time. She will need her ministers to identify the low-hanging fruits and then to do what is necessary, whether it is modification of government policies, whether it is improving the ease of doing business, whether it is holding the hand of the private sector and encouraging them and giving them the kinds of stimulus that is required in order to realize stronger growth in those low-hanging fruits. And there are quite a few, Mikey, that are around us that can not just generate revenue but can generate foreign exchange. And we all live and appreciate the challenge that we're having with respect to foreign exchange.
Yeah, one economist pointed out that the central bank data had clearly shown a deficit which had been widened over time, particularly with increased government spending ahead of the general election. I mean, some consideration should have gone into that seriously, especially for those who had a clear idea of the state of the economy. Now, of course, we're going to have to pay a price for that. Are we then going to see that some of these large projects that are ongoing right now may have to be put on hold?
Again, I don't think we're in a position 1 week into the new government to be able to make any pronunciation on that. It is my expectation that the government will approach the issue of expenditure management in a responsible manner. They will do it in a way to ensure expenditure that are linked directly to revenue generation will be the ones that are prioritized, and revenue that could result in increased reliance on the treasury in this moment in time would be the ones that would fall on the lower steps of the ladder. That is my expectation. My expectation is that the creating a more enabling environment. See, crime prevention, Mikey, that is, to me, the one that we want to see, and we don't want to compromise on that. We want to see action on that in as early as possibly. Prime Minister has given us 6 months. She says within 6 months we will see the changes, and I mean that is something I think I would really like to see her deliver on, because that would create such a different environment for business. I mean, that would be a fillip to tourism, to investor confidence in many other sectors. It would reduce the cost of doing businesses. It will allow businesses to operate for longer hours. Our entire entertainment sector in Trinidad and Tobago has been curtailed significantly because of crime. So, it is so heavily linked, and that is an area that I really want to see traction as soon as possible.
Yeah, also, when you look at what has taken place in the last almost 10 years, the former administration was not SME friendly. I mean, when you look at the fact that so many of our small and medium enterprises needed to have things like foreign exchange, perhaps even help with tax and what have you, these things were not forthcoming. Do you believe that these are the things that will have to be focused on now to give the private sector, especially SMEs, that jump start to get out there and get things rolling once again?
Well, what I would say is the last administration for 10 years really had a real tabanka with oil and gas. And that was the only thing they had eyes and ears for. I mean, we had a situation where, opening a shopping mall was was touted as very significant, or opening a new retail outlet, which means we were using foreign exchange, in order to buy, to sell to ourselves. That's not diversification. Diversification is where we are, especially export-led diversification, is where we are growing not just firms, but industries that can sell to the rest of the world and earn foreign exchange. That's where the focus needs to be placed, Mikey. So I will tell you that an approach that simply supports SMEs at an individual level is a failed approach. It has to be an approach that takes SMEs in a collective. So you need to take an industry and you need to take the SMEs and firms that exist within that industry, and you need to provide the support that is needed for that collective of firms to be able to compete against each other, cooperate with each other, and grow in order to be able to export to the rest of the world. That is how you generate sustainable employment. That is how you link to innovation, because the competition within those entities forces them to continually be doing things better, which means greater efficiency. So the approach, Mikey, has to be a little bit different, has to be more Michael Porter type cluster approach is what we need, and we have so many low-hanging pockets of activities that lend themselves naturally to us doing that. We simply need to support them.
When you talk about these low-hanging pockets, we haven't seen any focus on them for the past 9+ years. And one makes you wonder, why was that not made a priority?
But I think I answered that when I said, unfortunately, and this is something I spoke about throughout the
just
life
energy, yeah.
Yes, that. And it is not simply that we had an obsession with the energy sector. It became even narrow. It became a single focus only on the dragon gas.
That's right.
Steel and nothing else. And so that the campaign, when I confronted persons who spoke about about the failure of the UNC in its previous iteration, and spoke to the fact that, and when I raised the issue of the dragon was clear and there was no plan B, person said, well, no, there are 25 projects in the pipeline. And those very people post the election and have now narrowed that 25 projects to 9 projects, and have failed in order to identify it. So that we're really not sure, and I think we need to wait for the Minister of Energy to really give us a status on what is happening in the energy sector with respect to exploration within our own jurisdiction, because this is a priority as well. We have a significant number of plants. We have an entire cluster of economic activity that relies on a supply of gas. We are now only able to provide about 60% of the demand need for that particular sector. So we need to shore that up. And while we were all praying that dragon would have come through because we needed it, we were always very clear, people like myself were always very clear, what if dragon failed? Given all of the variables, many of which we had no control over, there's a strong likelihood it could fail. What are you, government, doing in order to ensure that there are alternative sources of gas that can come into play in order to be able to meet the shortfall that exists?
Yeah.
We need now, with a new government, we need to know what the answer, if there is an answer to that.
Yeah, and of course, it was mentioned at the post-cabinet press conference, Suriname, Guyana, Grenada, looking at these options, these new ventures, and seeing how best, of course, we can get in there and achieve some of the economic goals that we are looking at. Go ahead.
It is a reality that these are longer term, if at all they do happen. I mean, it is true that the newspaper today, the prime
Grenada
of Guyana,
yeah,
is saying that they have already identified use for their gas, and Trinidad were not in there. But again, this is a new government. In new government, it is now starting the process of negotiating with Guyana. It is not the old government. Maybe this government can persuade Guyana to go a different route that could see potentially find a way to see us playing a stronger role in the energy sector in Guyana. So, again, we need to give them some time to see how it plays out, right? And simultaneously too, Mikey, we need to start to be more aggressive with respect to energy transition. That needs to be as much a priority as finding new sources of gas, because we should have started this 10 years ago. If we had started the energy transition in a significant way 10 years ago, Mikey, we would have not been in the position that we are in today. And again, I laid the blame for that at the feet of the former administration.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% on that issue. If you had to speak to the private sector so they can have a better understanding what their role would be, what are some of the things that need to be outlined?
Well, you see, the private sector always responds to government policy. So I would want to start with the role of government. Government needs to point the direction to the private sector. This happens everywhere in the world. We talk about Singapore as a model to follow. Singapore has its economic development board that plays a very critical role in terms of identifying the sectors or the industries that should be focused in on, that works hand in hand with other state institutions in order to ensure that the fiscal incentive regime, the legislative regimes that are necessary that creates the ease of doing business within which business can feel comfortable to invest is in place. It goes a step further to work directly with the private sector in terms of ironing out and cleaning up any debris that might exist to encourage them to be able to move forward, so that from the state perspective, the state has its role and it needs to do that in a lot more functional manner. We have many state enterprises, Mikey. What we have not had is delivering on the objective when it comes to diversification, and that has to change.
I agree with you.
KPIs need to be identified. People need to be held to account on a timeline in terms of delivering. I think once those things are put in place, I have no doubt that the private sector in Trinidad and Tobago will rise to the occasion. In the same way that I have no doubt that if we get the environment for agriculture in place from a policy perspective, if we fix that from a directional perspective, I have no doubt that the agricultural sector and the farmers of this country will rise to the occasion in terms of moving us closer to that target of being a lot more self-sufficient in food production, helping us reduce the demand for foreign exchange because we're producing more of what we eat. So that is the approach, Mikey, that I would highly recommend. That I think is what has been missing. Our version of the Economic Development Board has been primarily a research unit.
Right.
That's all. And it can't, if we do that again, that's a recipe for failure. We have to do it different. We have to model it after the models that have been successful.
And how important is it to have these things outlined, not just, of course, have it one-dimensionally mentioned as far as tourism and agriculture? Because, I mean, when you look at it, you're talking about changing a socio-economic culture. We've heard about tourism before, we've heard about agriculture before, but now we're in a critical state that we must venture into these things by explaining and outlining exactly where we want to go from A to Z. And how difficult is that going to be?
I don't think it's very difficult, Mikey. I think it's very, very easy. But at the end of the day, I think you're trying to ask me in terms of how do we sell it to the population.
Exactly.
That is the key thing. And people are not stupid. People will be sold if they see action. If they see that the government is really serious about it. I mean, just splitting up organizations. They had one Trinidad and Tobago tourism development company. You split it and you make two, but it has existed for 5-6 years and they have not delivered anything. Government ministers holding these institutions to account in terms of setting the targets for what they must deliver on and holding them to account for delivery. I think that would go a long way in giving people the confidence. Involving the sector in the process of developing the strategy going forward is also very critical. People who have been doing the thing, they may not have all of the answers, Mikey, but they have a lot of the answers. They may not have access, in some instances, let's say farmers, to what's happening in many parts of the world, but that is where you have the institutional arrangements that must come in order to support them. Listen to them, involve them, ensure that they are part of the process of the solution, not just recipients of decisions made in ivory towers, imposed onto them, and they look at them and say, this really, you're not serious. And then people just go about doing what they're doing just to survive. So that the entire approach of communication, of integrating stakeholders, all of these things need to be done for us to move forward in a timely way and with speed. We don't have the luxury of time. I want to overemphasize this, Mikey.
I agree.
We no longer have the luxury of time. We've been talking about diversification now for potentially longer than I have been alive, which has been a while. I myself have been talking about it in the public domain since 2005, 2006. Right? I feel like a broken record on it. And imagine if since then to now, it takes about 10 years to start a new industry and have it on a pathway to sustainability. 10 years. 2006 to now, we've had a few 10-year pockets within there. Imagine if we were doing it in the way that we need to do it, what could happen? Of course, nothing can replace oil and gas. No one thing can replace oil and gas, but we have to recalibrate. We have to recalibrate. We have to reset expectations within this country. And at the end of the day, we have to do things that can generate jobs, sustainable jobs, rewarding jobs. We have to generate activities and things that can generate foreign exchange, because we need foreign exchange in order to be able to survive and do business with the rest of the world. We have to set what we do has to be driven ultimately by those kinds of targets. Employment generation, foreign exchange generation, revenues to government. These are the kinds of things that must drive where and how we focus in this and position ourselves going forward.
I understand clearly. Before you go, I want to ask you now, Labour itself is a part of this administration. The campaign have been on the platform. What is their role and how understanding and flexible are they going to be as being involved with the new administration?
But they have to be, Mikey, because they're no longer an external party simply agitating for their membership. They are now part of the governance system, and therefore they have to make decisions that are in the best interest of the country. Now, even as I say that, Mikey, I want to say that there are creative ways that we can find that doesn't cripple our treasury to ensure that the people of this country, the working class of this country, earn a wage that doesn't have them operating on 2014 incomes in 2025. I have articulated some suggestions. If the government goes into negotiation and they negotiate a higher wage offer, treat the back pay in a way that you give people what is due to them, but you sterilize it in the sense of it's not a drain on the treasury. Pay it through long-term bonds, which can be sold in the secondary market. Pay it through land, which could then stimulate economic activity through construction. There are so many creative ways that we can think about it. Even laptops, involve the private sector. Allow corporate Trinidad and Tobago to be the mechanism through which the Prime Minister's objective of a laptop for every child, a laptop or a tablet, whichever makes sense. Listen to teachers. Before you go implementing, have conversation with teachers because they have great ideas. They're the ones who work the system and they understand. Have conversation with them in order to find the best way in which to do this that does not, again, put a strain on the treasury. We could rethink things like date and all of these things. We can rethink it in a way where we ensure we make the money available to persons at the moment when they need it. But ensure going down the road, there is a sense of of responsibility that I must give back, and therefore after a few years working, you have a responsibility to pay back, even if it's some of it at a very low interest rate. You know, we have to think creatively in this moment as never before, Mikey. And I am giving the new government the chance and the space in order to be able to find these kinds of solutions. And I think we all should be, you know, on board to do this.
And I agree with you. And I think what we're really striking this evening is the fact that people want to be involved. They want to be a part of this. They want to participate, and not just be told that this might be best for you. But after 9+ years, I think they know exactly where they want to be and where they want to fit in, and understand the objective is, of course, the interests of the country. So I do agree with you on that.
Yes, absolutely.
Any closing comments? Go right ahead.
Well, my closing comments are that, you know, it is not an easy road. It is not an easy road that faces the government and faces the people of this country. I do believe that collectively we can rise above it, and we can find solutions to once again take that place that we have always had within CARICOM, within the region. You know, it is for us to have a little bit of patience, have an understanding, and, you know, and even as we do that, ensure that we are the watchdogs on our new government to ensure that they do not stray from their mandate, and ensure that they deliver on what is needed at this moment in time in Trinidad and Tobago.
Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to have you on. Do have a wonderful evening. Again, happy Mother's Day, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you very much, Mikey. You too.
Thank you.